Advanced branding.
Lex, I just reset the live streaming stuff, so maybe that'll do something. Maybe try it.
It says live on custom live streaming service. I think it's working right now.
It's going live now?
Yeah, and it's in Facebook. Yeah. Hey everybody. You did
turn off your video.
Welcome to the IDRA Hour. It's our third show, and by far and away our best show. We are joined by a very, very special guest all the way from Israel, Shai Tzabari, who should not need any introduction, and yet I'm going to give him a little introduction. Shai is a king, a real legend in the Israeli music scene, the new Israeli music scene. He has been part of this wave of rediscovering the Jewish past, the Jewish Siddur and the liturgical traditions of the Jews, and bring them into the mainstream in a voice all his own. It's really an extraordinary honor to be joined by him, but also a little bit bittersweet because we were supposed to be celebrating together in New York. Just a little bit later this month, he was going to have a show at Joe's Pub, the Public Theater downtown, which was going to be absolutely extraordinary. And then we were planning that with IDRA and Hadar's Rising Song Institute, we were going to do a whole Yom HaAtzmaut Shabbat fiesta together, which was going to be really something special. And of course, because of the pandemic, we can't do that. And so Shai has graciously taken some time out of his day, out of his quarantine, to sit with us and to sing with us and to tell us about Pesach as he knows it, as he does it in the way that only he can. So welcome, Shai.
Hi, how are you? Hello, everybody.
First of all, how are you doing?
Well, Baruch Hashem, I'm good. First, it's a great honor for me to join you guys. I hope you're doing well as anyone can be in this crazy times. I'm doing okay, spending most of my time with my kids, with my boys, and trying to play as much as I can and be as peaceful as possible in this kind of times.
Yeah. Everyone asks, like, Ma matzav ba'aretz? What's the atmosphere? How does it feel there?
Well, it depends who you talk to, but in Israel, you can feel that people are quite stressed about the situation. Sometimes it's over financial issues because, most of the people doesn't work these days, and there's unclarity about taxes payment and stuff like that. But it's also a great time for grace. People are really helping each other, and people are there for each other. And it's a very beautiful thing to see that people are still doing that for each other. Like, you see a lot of giving in these times. You see people giving a hand to each other, helping each other. It's very nice to see.
It's really interesting, right? Because one of the things one notices when you spend some time in Israel is that not everybody is so kind to one another, at least in a superficial way. You push each other in line, or you yell at one another. But then at times of crisis, perhaps there's more of a feeling of common cause, of togetherness, or you yell at one another.
I hope it would be changing the regular times, because I don't like this part of the Israeli culture, the rudeness, the lack of manners, the lack of ethics. I think it's something we brought from our origins, from original countries, but we forgot it somehow here in Israel, trying to reinvent ourselves. And while doing so, while reinventing ourselves as Jews or as Israelis, we spare some important parts of our cultures. I don't feel my culture or any other culture who came to Israel originally was as unpolite as the Israeli culture.
That's interesting.
Criticism about Israeli culture. Hopefully, I do my best in order to become a better person, more less rude and more polite person, to help each other instead of pushing and taking my place.
Yeah.
Where I can.
Yeah, it's still a young culture, and it's growing and it's finding its footing. It's changing in all sorts of ways, and you are very much part of that change, of the changing face of Israel, not just manners, but also the sort of the substance of what it is that you're talking about. Can you talk a little bit about your background, your parents, where they're from, and how you grew up?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a suburb of Tel Aviv called Bat Yam. Bat Yam, like free translation, is mermaid. Like my family originally came to Israel from Yemen. Both my parents were born in Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, and they came to Israel in 1950. They were around 9 years old. And I grew up in a religious Yemeni family. We have some different customs than other communities. We read Hebrew differently in the Babylonian dialect, and singing is very, very important. Like in Yemenite synagogues, all the people sing the whole prayer, all through the prayer, and we read our own parts while reading the Torah. Even kids read the Torah, so I learned to read the Torah as like Baal Koreh in other communities on a early age. My father, he's a Mori. A Mori is a teacher of this reading. He teaches kids and grown-ups how to read the Torah correctly. So I had the chance to learn it from him. And my late grandmother, his mother, was a folk singer. She used to sing in weddings and for women who just gave birth, and on the contrary, on funerals. Now, there's a tradition of mourning in Yemenite Jewish community, and she used to mourn for the dead. She was a great singer, actually, one of the best I ever heard.
You grew up with her?
I grew up with her, yeah. We all grew up in the same neighborhood here in Bat Yam. So I was really exposed to Yemeni music, like feminine folk music, which is in Arabic, from my grandmother, and liturgic male music. Or, I don't know if male is the right word to describe it. But only men sing liturgical music in Yemen. So I was exposed to both kind of musics. And later on, I discovered pop music, and I was really into becoming a musician. I really wanted to sing. In a very, very strange way, I became part of one of Israel's biggest rock stars. His name is Beri Sakharov, and I collaborated with him for 12 years. I was his back vocalist.
Wow.
And I also had some collaborations with big names in Israel, like Ahuva Ozeri, who was really great. She passed away 3 years ago. She was a legendary Israeli Mizrahi music singer, and with Idan Reichel, which I guess everybody knows. I sang in
Sang with him.
two of his albums, and with many other Israeli artists. And something like 6 years ago, I started my own career. I released my debut album. The name of the album is Shacharit, like the morning prayer. And it was named like that because there's a song named Shacharit in this album. The album, this song is written by an Israeli poet named Eli Eliyahu. It's a quite secular prayer, but it is sang as if it was composed by me, as if it was a very old Mizrahi piyut. And that's the trick with most of my music. Sometimes I use ancient text, sometimes I use modern text, but most of the time I compose them as Mizrahi music. It's something that haven't been done so much in Israeli music before.
Yeah, it's really interesting because Israeli music, up until maybe 20 years ago, pop music that you would hear on the radio was by and large secular and coming from the Ashkenazi background. But one thing that Israeli music, at least from my observation, does do is it takes beloved poems, which in sort of like in America, for example, would be very high culture, and it makes it into pop music. And so you do have this tradition of setting poetry to popular music, and you've taken that one step further, which is to take that poetry, be it religious poetry or secular poetry, and making it into a sort of a liturgical setting almost, a Mizrahi pop, but also liturgical setting.
It's not just Mizrahi, because some of this wave of new Jewish music is not just Mizrahi, but Mizrahi people, like people from the Middle East, they have their music was oppressed and it wasn't heard on the Israeli radio, for instance. You can say that about religious music or liturgical music. You couldn't hear it over the radio here in Israel 20 years ago. When I started, I tried to learn music in a very famous school here named Rimon, and it was more 25 years ago. And when I did so, I felt that there's no place for the stuff I bring from home. There's no place for the liturgical lyrics. There was no place for the heavy Mizrahi sound. There was no, and it wasn't so heavy. It was just weird for most of the people. There was place for jazz music, for instance. And there was place for American folk music. But there was no place for music which was much closer to me.
And much closer to many Israelis.
Yeah, I love jazz. But jazz is American music, African American or American music. It was invented in America. I don't see a reason why it should be part of the curriculum in music school in Israel.
So what?
Look at it, and you can learn a lot about it from it.
What changed? I mean, why do you think the kind of popular culture opened to you and to others who are now working in a kind of a mode that, for, as you say, for a long time there just wasn't room for, or wasn't accepted within the popular consciousness?
There are plenty reasons for that. I think we should. Two are the most important. One is that that till the mid 90s there was no any commercial TV channel in Israel. The TV channels were run by the government, or you can see TV channels from outside of Israel. And as soon as there was a commercial TV channel, Arutz 2, Channel 2, rating became a very important thing. So if people didn't like something, they didn't watch it. So people started saying, I'm not exposed on television. My culture is not exposed on television. That's how people, like religious people, more religious people and more Mizrahi people, find themselves or representations of themselves on screen. That started, it gave
legitimacy
to Mizrahi culture. And there was also two organizations who did a great job in entering in, I don't know the English word for that, in order to get people to know Piyut, for instance. These two organizations are Bet Avichai and Hillel, which you all know from the States.
Yeah.
And they did great job in doing so. Like they did collaborations between Paitanim, people who sing liturgical Mizrahi music, and Israeli pop or rock stars. And both sides learned each other culture, and it had a lot of influence. And after there was a big wave of people doing new Jewish music, the radio couldn't resist that. The radio had to broadcast this kind of music, and it became really, really popular.
Wow, it's an amazing story, actually. It's sort of like the Mapach, but it's the Mapach on the cultural level, right? The Mapach was when finally sort of the marginalized voices were heard in the political sphere. And now we're talking about how that happened in the cultural sphere. I'm not sure that our viewers know Beit Avichai. Beit Avichai is an amazing, amazing place run by David Rosenson in Jerusalem. And the Idra concept takes a lot of inspiration from what they're doing there. It's obviously in an American context, but it really is one of these examples of a cultural institution that has a physical location, but then its influence has spread really widely. How wonderful. It's great to hear, and it's amazing. I mean, I'm sure that's all true, and I'm also sure it's a tribute to you and to other artists of genuine talent and genius, you know, because it's not just representation, it's also the quality of the work that makes a big difference, I think.
You know, as every artist wants his music to be heard. He needs his music to echo.
Yeah.
And in order to have that, he needs some places to perform and people who can admire or just be exposed to his work. And these organizations and commercial TV did that. Well, today, actually, in many ways, the commercial TV went both sides, because rating brought the popular Mizrahi music to the mainstream media, but Piyut is not mainstream. And my wave of music, or the wave I'm part of in the Israeli music, is not totally mainstream. It's some part indie, and in many ways, it came out in order to contradict the rating culture, you know.
Yeah.
But because you say I can say the same stuff, but in higher language, in a liturgical way. I can say it in a very complex musical way, or a musical way who talk to my roots, and it make a difference. It can make a difference.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the time. We're right now recording the day before Pesach begins. Simcha Rabba, Simcha Rabba, Viviga Pesach ba, right? Great joy. Spring has come and Pesach is on its way, but it's going to be a strange Pesach for sure. A lot of people are going to be sitting in front of screens like this for the first time. Let's talk a bit about your Pesach growing up, what it was like, what the traditions were that you knew.
Well, we have a little bit different Pesach than others. We read it in the Yemeni dialect, which is different. might
We'll hear it in a second.
hear it in a second. We don't have some costumes, but we have other costumes. We have costumes like we don't steal the afikoman, for instance. We have a special wine we do. This is something I haven't told you in our formal talks. We have a special wine we do from raisins, especially for Pesach. It's called Kiddush. And we have some parts which are not part of the regular Haggadah.
You said, I want to stop you for 1 second because the afikoman, stealing and selling back, or hiding the afikoman, is one way we engage children, and it's really an Ashkenazi tradition. But you were telling me that there's also all sorts of fun ways that, not just in the Temani culture, but in Mizrahi starim generally, that you engage children by play acting, by pretending, and by...
Well, because I grew up in Bat Yam, and it's a very mixed neighborhood. I met with some costumes of my fellow neighbors. One of them is the Kurdish costume that the kids all go out with the packs on their backs. They go outside of the house and they knock on the door, and there's like a play going on the Seder Eve. The kids are knocking at the door, and the grown-ups ask, "Who are you?" And they say, "We're Bnei Israel." And they are saying, the grown-ups saying, "Where are you coming from?" And they say, "We're coming from Egypt." "And where are you going?" "We're going to Eretz Israel." What will you have there? "We're going to get the Torah, and then we go to Eretz Israel." That's
Wow.
Making it short.
It's a whole script, though. It's a whole tasrit between the...
And
it also, what's interesting is, like, I'm thinking just for a second that it's a way of fulfilling the mitzvah. B'chol dor v'dor chayav adam lirot et asmo ke'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. Right? In every generation, you actually have to see, like, imagine playfully that you're actually going out of Egypt.
Yeah, it's a fun way to remember this that story, and I think it's a way that nobody forgets. I think that if you are doing it as a kid, you will always remember this magical part of the Seder, when you went outside and you knocked on the door and you pretended to be Bnei Israel, and you pretended to walk in the desert and get the Torah and get to Eretz Israel, and you were welcomed back home, which is metaphorically, you were welcomed back home from the outside into the Seder. It's beautiful. I think.
How strange, though, that your father and mother at 9 actually lived that story. I mean, you have generations and generations of the Jews in Teman. They've been there for how long? For over 2,000 years, yeah?
It depends who you ask, but yeah, if you ask how many Jews there are there from the first Beit Mikdash, they didn't came back for the second Beit Mikdash. But apparently it's not, historically, it might be different. Probably for more than 1,000 years, there are Jews in Yemen.
Good enough. I'll take 1,000 years. So, I mean, that they actually lived that in their own lifetime, that they played going to Israel, and then they did. I think you told me a story, which I want to just share, which is such a moving story, that the way that the Yemenites were treated, the Yemenite Jews were treated was really terrible. And your father was the victim, or was in Sana when there was a pogrom, and when he was 5. Would you just tell that?
Yeah, my father was around the age of 5, and there was a pogrom in Sana, in the Jewish quarter of Sana, because Jews were not allowed to live outside of this quarter, especially in the night hours. They couldn't. It was locked at night, and they couldn't go out. They were so oppressed, and they couldn't. And people came from the outside, and they started to abolish homes and burn businesses. And my father went outside, and he was throwing himself on the floor, and he was screaming, "I want to go to Eretz Israel. I want to go to Eretz Israel now." And it's a myth, and it's a very known story in our family about my father, because my father was really hating Yemen. He was like in a very active way hated Yemen. It's something common in the Jewish community. For many centuries, they refused to accept Yemen as their homeland. They were always longing for Eretz Israel, and they hated the fact that they're in exile.
It's very much galut. It's really galut. It's really exile. There's some,
you should remember that Yemen is one of the hardest places to live in the world, probably. Even today, Muslim Yemen is a place suffering from hunger. It's the only place in the world that there are more than 3 million people suffering from hunger. And there are, it's more than any time in history. In Africa, in the worst time in Africa, like in the 80s, there was nothing like similar to what's happening in Yemen today. So we are talking about a third world country with enormous poverty, and where the Jews were really oppressed. They were second-grade citizens. So
it must make the story of Pesach that much more real, because obviously Pesach is a story about a people who live in a foreign land, but don't identify with that land. And so I want to start with a tradition that's unique to, when we walk through your Seder, a tradition that is unique to the Temani Jews, which is the text you shared with me. I'm going to share the screen so we can see it together.
Yeah.
Here, would you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at?
We're talking about, we're seeing the text. This text is called Machabar. Machabar is what have changed, Ma nishtana. But this text is, it's like the whole Haggadah in one story, one paragraph. It is written in Arabic, in Jewish Arabic, and it is meant for the women, because the women in Yemen didn't read and write, and they still wanted them to be part of this of the Seder. So the role of one of the boys, sometimes the youngest boy, was to read this part for the women, and it's in Arabic. It's the only part in the Haggadah which is in Arabic. And when I was young, we had this custom of reading this part of the Haggadah, and like the trophy for reading it well was to get a boiled egg. Boiled egg was really something really precious. But for us Israeli kids, we didn't speak Arabic. It was a challenge because we had to learn Arabic in order to read that well. So I can
please.
ما خبر هذا الليلة من جميع ليالي خرجوا جدودنا وبيانا من مسبة العبودية ما كانوا يفعلوا كانوا يخلطوا التيب في اللب واللب في اللب لمان رفعوا الروح الجمهور على دراسة أحسن السمعور بفم مساعق مناق التنور وأولاد الله على المصريون الدام والطفاع والجمال والجمال والوحوش والفنا والجراب والبراد والجراد والظلام وموت الأبكار. حيت عجوز بتجوز عليها عالف عنات الجوز كان معاها معبود من عنا فوق التنور مركوز دخل القلب المعنوز أكل المعبود المركوز بصراخ طلاك ليلى وخن صراخ عتيم بنص لقيه مشنا أموك إن بايد أشغ إن شومه وغرقوا المصريون في بحر القلزام وخرجوا بني إسرائيل من وسطه وخلدهم الله بيا شديدة وذراع ممودة وأحكام عظيمة وآيات إبراهيم على دم وشرب بينه علو وشولهم. And that's the whole Haggadah with an added story about an old lady which her idol was eaten by a dog in order
the
to
Jews. It's not Jews. It's Jews is a word for an old woman.
what?
I heard you say Jews when you got to that section, but we're not talking about the Jews. We're talking about.
I'm sorry. It's an added story about an old lady, an Egyptian lady, which her idol was eaten by a dog. While there was a Makat Bechorot in Egypt, in order to show how severe was this Makkah on Egypt.
I'm going to send you an egg when we're done, so that because that was excellent. Wow, that's amazing. How interesting also to have like a summary of the Haggadah that you understand, that you can say to yourself again and again, and just one bite. It's wonderful.
I guess in Yemen they stopped for a while in order to explain or in order to tell the story of Haggadah in Arabic, but this is the summary of the whole Haggadah, and it comes in the place of Manishtana, in the same place of Manishtana. Well, I in particular, I don't like the fact that there is. I like the fact that they translated the Haggadah for the women. I don't like the fact that women in Yemen didn't know how to read and write. I think it was done. I'm glad it's not like this today. You know, I think.
So obviously, singing and celebration is a big piece of the Seder, of the Haggadah, and I want to talk a little bit more about the idea of giving thanks. Here, hold on. There we go. Can you talk a little bit about just the spirit of Thanksgiving, of Hodaya, and how that expresses itself in the Seder?
Well, there's the whole Seder is about saying thank you and remembering the Chesed, the thing that what our Lord, the grace our Lord did to us while going out of Egypt. And really great part of it is the Hallel. After saying the whole story, after telling the whole story of the Haggadah of going out of Egypt, we stop and we say Hallel, as we say in holidays and as we say in Rosh Chodesh. And I really like the Yemeni Hallel. It's very beautiful.
Yeah. When you talk about how despised the Yemenite Jews were, that one thing that comes across in the Hallel is this idea, right, that the Jews, the heroes of the story, are Even Ma'asu Habonim, right? This stone that was not worthy, that was not considered valuable at all. And then it becomes something essential, something really important. I mean, it's a story both of the Jewish people, of the Yemenite Jews. Maybe there's something universal about that idea that, the world around me doesn't see my value, but I'm persuaded that I have real value and that I can become of essential value to the universe.
A few years back, I wrote to Bet Avichai website an essay about it, about this sentence, Even Ma'asu Habonim, Hayta Lerosh Pina. While doing that, I was looking over the internet who composed this song. And then I found out a song by Bob Marley. He composed that same sentence. I really love that. Bob Marley was the son of a black woman and a white post office officer, I think, in Jamaica. And because of that, he was not accepted. Not by his father and not by the community he grew up in, because he was partly orphaned.
Wow.
But he still had this conviction, that he was special, and he was. And I really connected to this, and I really think it's part of the ethos of Yemeni Jews here in Israel. Yemeni Jews they take a great part of the Israeli music scene for many years. Like especially Yemeni women are there in the most important junctions of the Israeli music scene. They bring their own unique voices, and they bring their own style of, and sometimes parts of their dialect, their special Hebrew dialect. But Yemeni Jews are famous for taking these origins of them and combining it with Western music. You can see it with singers like Brachat Sfira, or a singer like Shoshana Damari, or the late Ahuva Ozeri. There were injunctions which were very important to the development of the language, or the new language of Israeli music. And
I can say that in my life, I grew up not knowing anything about Israel, but there was a moment in the 80s when Ofra Chaza's Im Nina Lu crossed over, and I was just blown away. She was a goddess. She was amazing.
And it's, in the same time, when she was so successful around the world, people from her origins, or she herself, was not so appreciated here in Israel.
Yeah.
That was in the 80s, and it was totally different times.
That's right. And he הייתה לראש פינה, and she's become one of the people.
That's the best example for this sentence.
All right, so let's hear how you sing. This is also as you say, in the Babylonian dialect, and the pronunciation that the Temanim use.
And then the whole family answered. Oh, the khoki ani thani, what the hilili shu'a, avan moasu habbanim, oh yadon rosh pina, med adonai, oh yadozat. נפלט בעינינו, זה היום עושה אדוני, נורי לו ונשמח בו.
Wow.
So it goes like this, and there is we repeat each sentence, the whole family. One is reading and the other are reciting.
Yeah, beautiful. I wish Bob Marley could hear you. I feel like that would be like a balance in the universe.
I could meet Bob Marley.
That's amazing. Wow. One thing, Shai, at the end of this, what I'd love to do is maybe we can put together a playlist of some of your music, and we can put that in the comments to this video so people can really explore more of your music.
I love
that. Wonderful. I want to keep on singing.
Okay.
So let's move on. So there's a beautiful song. We know it's sung in B'tei Knesiot, in Shul every Shabbat. It separates in Shul Psukei de Zimra from Shacharit, but it has its origin in the Haggadah. And it's called in the Mishnah, Birkat Hashir, which is such a beautiful name, right? The blessing of song altogether. Sort of that's what you're giving us. You're giving us Birkat Hashir here generally, that singing is such a blessing.
Sing it. You have a special tune for that, melody for that?
There's one that's now, I think you maybe know, you've met with Joey Weisenberg, who's become a real sensation in American Jewish musical circles as well. And he's started the Rising Song Institute with Yosef Goldman, who we talked about. And he composed a melody famous in my circles, about 6 or 7 years ago. There was an all-night Tikkun Leil Shavuot that Hadar ran. And he evidently spontaneously came out with a melody just there. And it has become one of my favorite melodies of all time. It's new, and it's a very American melody. And it's just for the first line, and then toward the end it picks up again. You want me to sing that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this is Joey's magnificent melody. It goes Nishmat kol chai tivorech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu Nishmat kol chai tivorech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu Yadadai dai 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 Hi, dai, 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 dai.
Wow, it's so beautiful.
It's really beautiful. I'll send you a recording of it after this. It's really, and the harmonies that he brings, you know, especially because Joey really has a wonderful group of singers that sing around him. The harmonies that they do, particularly the women doing harmonies with him on that, is just magnificent. I'll send it to you. But I want to hear, you said that there's a contemporary song that.
Yeah, there's a contemporary Israeli song sang in the Yemeni dialect. There's this guy named Yaniv Matari. He composed the same text. It goes, I sing part of it. It goes, Nishmat kol chai tavorech et shimcho Adonai Eloheinu והרוח כל בוסר תפואר ותרומם זכרכו מלכנו תמיד מן העולם עד העולם התואר ובלעוד החור אין לנו מלאך ג'ואל ומשיח חודה ומסיל ועולה ومرحب وإن لونه مالا إن لونه مالا خلوته
Wow.
That's the.
So he composed it, but you still use the Babylonian pronunciation, not the Israeli pronunciation.
Yeah, you know, it's once you learn this dialect, the Babylonian dialect, you see the Hebrew. You know that the Hebrew has another form. You can read Hebrew as if it was a magical language, which is more musical, which is a sister language for Arabic. You know, in Hebrew as we speak it here in Israel, in the Sephardi way, we speak in the Sephardi way, not the Ashkenazi way and not the Yemeni way. In the Babylonian dialect, in the Yemeni dialect, there are more syllables is the word? You have more sound.
Consonants. Right? Itzurim.
Yeah, like for instance, we have het, and we have chaf, and we have ayin, and aleph, and hey, but we also have a difference between chaf, kaf, and guf. Guf is kuf. You know, everybody.
It's deep.
Yeah, it's deeper. And we have resh for resh. You know, we have jimal. Jimal is like J. You know, and we have G. And we have Gimel without a dot is Rimal. Rimal, similar to R or something between R and G. So
like
we
the Arabic Rein, right?
Like like the Arabic, like you have in the Arabic language. So I think it's it's richer Hebrew. We know Hebrew as a richer language, and it's a very musical way to hear or to talk Hebrew. I love it. You cannot forget it once you know it.
We Idra hosted a Victoria Chana last Pesach around this time actually, and she did Shir Shirim for us, and she was saying similar things, you know, about the riches of Hebrew that kind of lie under the surface of contemporary, you know, everyday Israeli Hebrew with its Ashkenazi set of.
The Ashkenazi Hebrew is much more musical than the Hebrew we speak today, because you know Ashkenazi Hebrew is Mil'el language.
Right.
So, Mil'el. So, like for instance, Chaim Nachman Bialik, the national poet of Israel, he wrote his poems in Ashkenazi dialect. For instance, in Israel, we say one of his famous songs is Shalom Rav Shuvech, Tzipor Nechmedet, מארצות החום אל חלוני. And he wrote it, Shalom Rav Shuvech, Tzipor Nechmedet, מארצות החום אל חלוני. It's a much more beautiful way and much more musical way to speak Hebrew, but they had to take, or they felt that they had to take a decision regarding one way to speak Hebrew here in Israel, and they did, and that's what we have. But still, we have so many of archaeological ways to speak our own language.
I mean, so the movement that we're talking about here, which you're very much a part of, is also kind of reviving Hebrew language, right? It's finding all these well springs inside of Hebrew to reinfuse it. It's a kind of a rebirth, like almost like a springtime for a rebirth of the language after it was spoken for a while. I want to make sure that we hear some of your compositions before we have to end.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about let's talk about this song for a second. I'm going to stop the share while you talk about it. I'm going to go back to the share when we start to sing.
Okay. This song is written by a poet named Chaviva Pdaya. She's also a Kabbalah researcher. She comes from a very famous Iraqi rabbinical family. Her late grandparents were Mekubalim. They studied Kabbalah and they were really famous about it. And she wrote this song, which is a longing song. It's really appropriate for these days when we only want to go outside. It's called Hamelech Tevi'eni Chadarecha. You actually translated it so beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, what a beautiful poem. I mean, so this also, it's you said she wrote the song. In Hebrew, shir is poem and song. She wrote a poem. This is what you were explaining that you do often, right? She wrote this beautiful poem, which is, right, it's both, it sounds antique, it sounds like it's from a different time, but there are elements in it which also make it sound very contemporary, I think. In particular, the feeling, I think, that runs through it of disappointment, right? That I'm waiting, but I'm willing to talk about how much my waiting is still disappointed, even though I'm going to continue to wait. There's something a little modern in that to me.
Yeah, I think I love it because of the longing. I think longing for something, the feeling of missing out, if you're not neglecting it, if you're not letting it ruin you, it can be a source for creation. It can be a force, a great force inside of you, and that's why I chose to compose the music for this song.
As you say, it really is appropriate for this moment where we're longing not to go into the rooms, to go out of our rooms, and here we go.
Exactly. So I sing. That's it. המלך תביאני חדריך, חדריך, המלך תביאני חדריך, המלך תביאני חדריך, חדריך המלך תביאני חדריך. ימים רבים צפיתי וכלום לא ראיתי, נשבעתי לא אציץ וקל לי לקיים כי לא אראה לה אותך המלך תביאני חדריך, חדריך המלך תביאני חדריך. המלך תביאני חדריך, חדריך המלך תביאני חדריך. שם אתן בחילך, שם גלותי, שם אתן בחילך המלך חדרים. המלך תביאני חדריך, חדריך המלך תביאני חדריך. המלך תביאני חדריך, חדריך המלך תביאני חדריך. המלך תביאני חדריך, חדריך המלך תביאני חדריך. המלך תביאני חדריך, חדריך המלך תביאני חדריך.
Wow, whoa. Magnificent. Let me start on. It's amazing how you also integrate there something that sounds so Mizrahi and also so Hasidic, you know, toward the end.
It's what we did. I don't believe there's a bad music or good music. I think that music is music, and I love Ashkenazi tunes, and I love Hasidic tunes, nigunim, and I love pop music and rock music, Mizrahi music. And this song was influenced by Muslim Qawwali music, which is in Indian music, Sufi Muslim music, which has a singer sing his sentence and then people are repeating after him. And also there is a part of real klezmer music we quote. It's a real klezmer music we decided to quote in this as part of this song. And I think it's part of what we're trying to say about Israeli music. That if you want to change, you don't use the same methods that were used against you, or the things that you go against, you know? If I'm Mizrahi, it doesn't mean I'm anti-Ashkenazi. It means that I'm pro-Mizrahi, but I can still love Ashkenazi music, I can still love pop music, I can still love rock music. It's just one part of my identity. Right. We all have so many faces these days. We are women or men, we are secular or religious. We sometimes somewhere in, most of us are somewhere in the middle between this, how do you call it, הגדרות, and we all try to do our best, and the best way to do that for me is by singing. So I use my singing in order to do that.
Do we have time for one more? What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do one more. So we talked about that on Pesach we're heading somewhere. We're leaving our galut. The previous song talked about galuti or galut, right? My sense of exile, and so we're heading somewhere on Pesach. And so you've written us a prayer for the journey, Tfilat HaDerech.
The traveler's prayer.
Yeah.
These days we usually it's longer. It's less personal in Hebrew. We speak rabim in plural in rabim. But this prayer is an ancient prayer from the first Siddur ever edited by Rav Saadia Gaon in Egypt 1,000 years ago. And I found there this prayer, which is very, very short. It's very, very personal. It's and I really, really, really loved it. So I composed it like this.
Okay, let me share the words.
שתוליכני לשלום ותחזירני לשלום ותסמיכני על שלום ותצילני מכף האויב ואוהב על הדרך מכף האויב ואוהב על הדרך יהי רצון יהי רצון לפניך אדוני אלוהי שתוליכני לשלום ותחזירני לשלום ותסמיכני על שלום ותצילני מכף האויב ואוהב על הדרך מכף האויב ואוהב על הדרך ברוך אתה ברוך אתה שומע תפילה שומע תפילה.
Wow. Thank you so much, Shai.
Thank you.
Such an eze kavod. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
L'shana ba'a b'Yerushalayim habnuya.
Amen. I hope everybody will keep well, keep safe. I hope we're all gonna meet after this whole thing is gonna finish. And I know our happiness will be greater and bigger because we really got outside of this prison we're in. We went outside of exile. So Chag Sameach to everybody.
Chag Sameach to you. Thank you so much, and thank you to everybody for tuning in tonight. And be sure when Shai does make it to New York and make it to the States for his tour that you come and listen to him. He's just an absolutely extraordinary talent and gift to the world. So Chag Sameach to everybody.
Sameach, thank you.
Bye.
you.